Shout out to my Jewish brothers who aren't rats, who didn't sell out. That's what it means to be a rat. It means to be a Jew that's sold out. Just like being a Sambo doesn't apply to all black people. Being a rat doesn't apply to all Jews. And being a maggot doesn't apply to all white people. In fact, there are some non-white people that are maggots, but we won't get into that. Now, I'm going to be citing, because I just started this book and already I couldn't wait to show you some of my findings. Imbeciles by Adam Cohen. The Supreme Court, American Eugenics and the Sterilization of Carrie Buck. It also talks about Harry Laughlin and so on. But let me just give you, just from the beginning of this book, and for those of you who get mad, those non-Northern Europeans who are going to get mad, just remember there's at least one mulatto in America that hates them more than you can imagine, to make a long story short, and that hates them more than you ever possibly could. Introduction, bottom of the page. The Chief Justice was William Howard Taft, who had served as president before ascending to the bench. This is the Buck versus Bell ruling. Louis Brandeis, the towering progressive who had made his name as the people's attorney, signed on the majority opinion, as did Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr. Now this is important. You see, Holmes was considered an expert. And to this day, you're going to see people, especially cops, saying, listen to the experts. We need an expert opinion. Now listen to what the experts had to say about eugenics. And keep in mind their families are still prominent and wealthy to this day. Rockefeller is the most powerful person, an honorary member forever on the Council on Foreign Relations. They will always cite his work and his stupidity. Anyway, going on. Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., widely considered to be one of the greatest legal minds, if not the greatest, in American history. Now, what did the greatest, quote-unquote, legal mind in American history have to say about eugenics? It was the legendary Oliver Wendell Holmes who wrote the 1927 ruling, and he included in it one of the most brutal aphorisms in American jurisprudence. Holmes, the Harvard-educated scion of several of Boston's most distinguished families, was scornful of the poorly educated Carrie and her working-class mother. Based on scant information about the two Buck women and about Carrie's daughter, who was a small child at the time, he famously declared, 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. Just briefly show, pause if you have to, so you know that I'm not just making this up or something. Let me show you the first page where it says, that's what I was reading. Hopefully you can see that. Moving on. I'm just going to briefly touch on this, share some of my thoughts, and make this a short video. Page 4 at the bottom, and then I'll start with page 5 at the top. Its answer to the foreign threat. Okay, basically, the eugenics movement offered 2 solutions, one for the threat from without, and one from the danger from within. Its answer to the foreign threat was new immigration laws to limit the number of Italians, Eastern European Jews, and other non-Northern Europeans admitted to the country. The eugenicists claimed the groups they wanted to exclude had inordinately high levels of physical and mental hereditary defects that were degrading America's gene pool. They offered what purported to be scientific evidence, including intelligence tests, claiming that between 40 and 50% of Jewish immigrants arriving at Ellis Island were mentally defective. 40 to 50%. Now keep in mind, the Jews are probably the most educated people in the world right now. So eugenicists are historically wrong, and they're still in power making the same claims, but going about things differently. The American Birth Control League, for instance, changed its name to Planned Parenthood. John D. Rockefeller, who funded research into eugenics, his son, David Rockefeller, is a very powerful member of society and an honorary member of the Council on Foreign Relations, probably the most respected member. In fact, let me see if I can find this real quick. It does say something about John D. Rockefeller's investments. It goes on to talk about the Immigration Act of 1924. I should have highlighted this. I apologize. All right, so on page 2, bottom paragraph. America's leading citizens led the charge to save humanity. John D. Rockefeller Jr., the world's wealthiest man, funded scientific research into how what he called the defective human could be bred out of the population. Alexander Graham Bell became chairman of the board of scientific directors of the Eugenics Record Office in Cold Springs Harbor, New York, the leading organization advocating the eugenic sterilization. And former President Theodore Roosevelt took to the pages of a national magazine to insist that the unfit must be forbidden to leave offspring behind them. So now, how many of you are stupid enough to think that David Rockefeller didn't continue his father's work worldwide? Once they had thoroughly established eugenics policies in America, they moved on, as Kissinger would put it, to depopulate the third world. And they said that that is one of the highest priorities of foreign policy. And you see Bill Gates talking about, birth rates as well. And of course, I've gone over many times, his father was a former president of Planned Parenthood. Whenever you see the children of eugenicists talking about eugenics, talking about the dangers of population, rest assured that they mean the poor, the quote-unquote unfit, the quote-unquote inferior stocks, much harm. You see, we live in a society where some of the people who were historically targeted by eugenics, and the same people are still targeted to this day, to some degree, are actually helping the eugenicists run a psych op on me and try to stop me from stopping them. Are you starting to understand how deep this goes? And keep in mind, this is like the first 7 pages of the book. It's already enough to make you want to start yelling and screaming and crying and thinking about killing people. If you have a heart, that is. If you're not impartial to 65 million preventable deaths annually, 500,000 preventable deaths from psychiatric medication alone in Western countries alone. Now, keep in mind that it was the psychiatric institutions that would evaluate people and determine who was unfit to live. Now remember, psychiatry likes to say that long ago they used to think people were possessed with demons and they treated them so bad, but then we started to improve our institutions and we started treating them with medications, with pharmaceuticals, like ones used to sterilize people. For instance, like Zyklon B, the gas chambers. There is a controversy over whether or not gas chambers existed. But one thing that cannot be debated is that the sentiment, the eugenic sentiment that the Nazi regime created in World War II cost Jewish people their lives. In fact, some of the first people put into the camps were the mentally disabled and mixed people and people who were considered to have a psychiatric illness, a mental illness. Those were some of the first people put into the camps. Now ask yourselves, do you really think that they are not doing eugenics on me intensely for my political activity, which makes me a prime target, for being biracial, which makes me a prime target, for a perceived mental illness, which makes me a prime target? Whenever you have eugenicists in charge, and they're the richest people, and you see the most profitable industries are the pharmaceutical industry and the technology, the tech industry, you should know very well that these industries work hand in hand to do eugenics on people. The surveillance state, cyber attacks, dating sites to help identify the reproductive activities of quote-unquote undesirable peoples. It is impossible to truly think about what I'm saying and do the research with what I'm saying in mind and to not come to the conclusion that I am absolutely correct. Impossible. Unless, of course, you are feeble-minded. Some of these people will always be chicken neck sons of bitches, whoever they may be. And because they are politicians, it is fair play to call them names. Unless, of course, you're going to round up all Americans, because pretty much all of us take shots at politicians, and, sue them and put them in jail and drug them. So I say to you politicians who do not like what I have to say, you're going to have to take it, buddy. You sided with eugenicists, and you are going to have to go down in history as scum. Now, you might have a bunch of rich celebrities kissing your ass, but rest assured, there is at least one top martial artist in history that thinks that you are the lowest forms of filth, poisonous slime, and excrement. And rest assured, I fucking hate you for it. I fucking hate you for it. And if it was up to me, well, I'll leave it there. Thank you.